What's up, world? Welcome to the AwokenWord podcast. This is your host, Anuj. Now, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. Yes, you're not crazy. This is the first episode being published in quite some time. A little thing called COVID that you might have heard about at some point in the last 6 months has definitely had an impact on a lot of people. Thankfully, everyone on my end is safe and healthy, and just had to shuffle and reprioritize a few things along the way. But AwokenWord is alive and well, and there's a lot more to come. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on housekeeping. I just really want to get you into this next great episode. Over the past few months, I've actually had some wonderful conversations with some great individuals, and you're going to see those episodes coming up over the coming months. Today's guest is the man, the myth, the legend, G Yamazawa. G, or George Yamazawa, is actually out of Durham, North Carolina, and he is a simply incredible rapper, spoken word poet, hip-hop artist, and just an all-around interesting dude. I'm glad we had a chance to connect, and this conversation was really rewarding for me, talking to an artist who is as fresh and as thoughtful in what he does, has a real reverence for the musical traditions, and the shoulders of the giants on which he stands is always a nice feeling for me. G has just got some really sick flow, and he's got a message in his music. This conversation was actually recorded some time ago, so if it seems a little tone deaf to some of the things that have happened in recent weeks or months, you'll know why. We actually spoke a couple months into the pandemic, and yet this was well before the entire George Floyd incident happened that completely shook the world, as it should. This is before the pandemic hit full swing. This is before TikTok was banned. This is before Trump came down with COVID. This is before all of the shenanigans that have led up to what is now full force 2020 elections in the US. It's before all of that. So we don't touch on some of those current events, but I think a lot of what we talk about is true and eternal to music, to artistry, and to just being a human in today's world. We did have this conversation over video chat, so you will hear at some point some audio artifacts, and I do apologize for it, but it is a sign of the times that we live in. In this conversation, G and I end up connecting on the small world dynamics that brought us together into this conversation and how that all works. He talks about what it was like growing up in Durham, North Carolina, and what it means to him. I really enjoyed the point where he started to share a little bit about how spoken word poetry became a mechanism for him in finding his own authentic voice in hip-hop and in rap. And we go on to talk a lot about what hip-hop means to the world and why it resonates. And we talk a lot about what music, and particularly black music, means for not just America, but for the world, and why it's been able to carry so far into every corner of the world. We do talk about America today, or at least today as of a few months ago, what the COVID lockdown means, what it means for artists and for music and people just hustling to try and make a living. And we do touch on the election, although we don't spend a ton of time on it. Regardless, G is a man that you need to watch out for. He does have a new album coming out, I believe, in the next several weeks. So if you've been living under a rock and you haven't yet heard about G Yamazawa, I would ask you to pause right now, go and check out some of his music, check out some of his videos, hear some of his live spoken word poetry, and come back here. And what you'll actually see is a very thoughtful, intelligent, well-versed man. And I think you'll get a glimpse into the madness behind the method inside of G's head. And although 2020 has been an absolute raging tire fire of a year, there's always moments of incredible hope in this crazy world. One of those moments I found out was at some point after our conversation, G actually just recently got engaged, and I just want to wish you, G, as well as Chris, a lifetime of happiness together. I hope you have crazy adventures and a life full of love, and just wish you peace and blessings for an incredible journey ahead. Without further ado, I give to you my conversation with the rapper, spoken word poet, the mystic, the mad genius that is G Yamazawa. This podcast is my humble attempt to bring a full grain of sand of goodness to the beach of human experience. Inspiring. This podcast is my love letter to all of you. The AwokenWord podcast. We are back here on the AwokenWord podcast. I am your host, Anuj Rastogi, and I am absolutely stoked for today's conversation. I've got one of the more interesting people that I've probably come across, and I hadn't even yet met him here with me. Well, actually, he's in LA and I'm in Toronto. G Yamazawa is a rapper, spoken word poet, slam champion, as I understand it, a cultural diplomat for the U.S. Department of State. You've been all over the media from ABC and NBC to PBS. You have performed at the Pentagon, which maybe at some point we'll talk about. How the hell did you end up at the Pentagon? And you do something that seems to be pretty close to heart for me, which is kind of challenging perceptions and thinking around the human condition, which is what AwokenWord is all about. G, thank you for being here. I'm really curious to hear what it's like to be a Japanese American in 2020 mid-COVID America in the middle of a pandemic. How is life?
Oh man, what a loaded question, man. It's great to be here. Life for me, man. I'm sure as many other folks, like in the kind of midst of all this stuff going on, trying to stay quiet and trying to lay low and trying to address some of the things in my personal life that maybe I've been neglecting in both good and bad ways. And it's interesting for me, particularly where I've for one spent all of my 20s touring and being on the road by myself, and I've had to use social media like very professionally in a sense, and almost was obligated to sort of be on social media. And I love social media, don't get me wrong, but there's those moments where you kind of don't want to be on it, but you feel like you got to keep up with everybody.
I feel you.
So yeah, for right now, the last 2 months for me, I've been able to stay quiet and get to just read, man. I'm not a reader by any means, and just do things like that and trying to stay afloat, man, like everybody else.
That surprises me, actually, hearing that you're not a reader. That I would have seen you as a reader for sure.
Nah. A listener, I guess, man. Listener, watcher, picture, go straight to the pictures type of cat, man. Yeah.
Well, look, let's just talk a little bit about how we end up here. It's always cool to just see how things kind of line up and how stars align. So I think it would have been 2 or 3 years ago, maybe just randomly on YouTube, I came across North Cac. And I hear this track and I see you, and it's fresh. It's like nothing else I've heard before. And it's coming from a place that I don't really know a lot about, Durham, North Carolina. And it's pure hip hop at the same time. And I'm a huge lover of hip hop, grew up on it. I've had artists from around the world who are hip hop artists and poets and whatnot on here as well. But something just kind of stuck out to me. And then I checked out a few more tracks, and I think it was pretty quickly became a fan. I really liked Dining Room, I think it is. And I think that was one of those pieces where I realized, okay, this guy's clearly got flow, he's got bars, but he's telling a story that's coming from a real, genuine place, which is what art and hip hop really should be about. So fast forward, a few years, I end up on Ruckus Avenue Radio. I hadn't yet met Sammy, but fast forward, end up meeting him, had him on the show, and it was really cool because I had actually seen him about 10 years ago, maybe actually more, 13, 14 years ago, when he had a group called Karmacy in the Bay Area. And he's actually one of the people that was part of the genesis of hip hop moving from the US out into India. And there's this incredible underground hip hop scene that's not so much underground anymore. But he's one of the original influences that actually drove that, because he started rapping in his own dialect and, in a language outside of English in a way that people could internalize there. And I was just scrolling through Instagram and I saw this pre-Grammy party with the Ruckus crew. And in the back, I'm like, is that G Yamazawa? So I reached out to Sammy. I'm like, yo, is that G Yamazawa in your photo? He's like, yeah, you know him? I'm like, no, I don't know him, but I'd love to talk to him. So
Right.
here we are. It's crazy how things just come together.
Yeah, man. The circles. Yeah, and they keep circling. They keep going somehow.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
absolutely.
hmm and I mean, me and
So,
Sammy, we go back a few years as well, and we had sort of just reconnected, so kind of out the blue. Um, and so yeah, so it's been great reconnecting with Sammy as well, working together.
how'd you guys first meet or come across each other?
He hit me up about the dining room track, actually,
Ah,
particularly, and it's funny. Something I told him too, that we just had started talking and building, like a lightweight connection, and then we ended up doing the project, the Active Change project as well, for the White House Initiative for Asian American and Pacific Islanders. But one of the things he told me, I just remember, we had some random conversation about me trying to get this album done. It was Shouts to Durham.
right.
And yeah, I just like felt I was like a young cat. I was felt like I needed a studio, real good studio, and like a budget. And I felt like I should have been signed by then. And then he was like, "Dude, you need to get a record done to represent and reflect this time of your life. Like, you just need to put it out because you need to." And that really resonated with me, and kind of was that last step I needed, and last thing I needed to hear to get the project done. And yeah, so
Yeah, the man's got wisdom, that's for
for
sure.
sure.
So, for the people that don't know you and may not have heard your work, who is G Yamazawa?
Man, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's so weird, man. I'm like such a weird, oddly unique person with a unique story, but also I am just the most regular dude ever that like doesn't read. Like I'm like I really am. I think you're just you're a homie from around the way kind of guy. I would say. And yeah, I love rapping, and I don't know, man. It's a great question, man. It's always, I get real uncomfortable with questions like that. Like, how do you describe your sound? Or yeah, I gotta get better at these things, man. Yeah, probably just part of this new generation and wave of kids who grew up in '90s, early 2000s, and loved rap, but grew up with it, the commercialized version, in a way, and trying to just figure it out, kind of like everybody else. But and yeah, I would say I'm a millennial and all of these things too. And um, I kind of like where I'm at as far as this middle ground, where I'm
Right.
29 and I feel like this really middle child as far as generationally. Um,
Mm.
so
So,
yeah.
so let's walk it back. You're in LA now, but
hmm
let's talk about Durham and you growing up. And I know this has been kind of a recurring theme in your poetry and your music, but what's Durham like? What would surprise people who've never been there? What do you think they need to know that would be, would catch their ear? And what does it mean for you?
Man, it's a hard question to answer as well, because Durham's changed like everywhere else, so rapidly. So the Durham that and what it means to me may be different to what it you could get, from it if you were to visit right now. But I think a lot of things still ring true, which is that it's like a humble but still prideful place, and it's a small, simple place, and it's like surprisingly extremely diverse and progressive, and accepting and tolerant and loving, and hardworking and gritty, and it has its own kind of dark side as well. But yeah, I think it's that culture. You would just feel, certain places you go to, you feel the culture without even really. It's a kind
Mm,
of a sensibility. It's in the air.
right.
And there's things you can point out, but at the end of the day, there's this like feel that you get, and I think that Durham has that as small of a place as it is.
And were you born there?
Yeah,
Okay.
Durham Regional.
So, people can definitely check out your music and some of your poetry to get an inside glimpse on some of this stuff. But I'm curious how poetry, like spoken word poetry and rap come into your life, how hip hop come into your life. Like what role did these play with you growing up and how did you end up finding yourself in this? How did you find yourself realizing I'm not going to just consume this, I can create this?
Good question. I mean, well, I'll start by saying I wanted to rap. that was the main thing from like 13, 14, 15, 16. It was
Hmm.
rap, wanted to make it. And like I said, like I think I always understood the difference between, radio and underground. And
Right.
I understood that there was this true school um and pop thing, but it wasn't that clear to me. I didn't have a community in which that was so clear that I had this like, community of folks that was listening to kind of subgenre shit. And, so I
Right. Yeah.
grew up with this huge wave of commercial rap. And I think as I was like getting older and realizing this like major moral dilemma about like what to rap about and who to be, that's when poetry came into the picture. And what poetry allowed me to do was get to write, get my shit off, get in front of an attentive, respectful audience, as small as it was, which was right like 7 people, man, for real, and just get it in, and that's where I think the true school spirit of what this oratory tradition that we're a part of is
Hmm.
where I learned the depth of hip hop through poetry, I would say. And yeah, and I think the poetry allowed me to go back into the realm of rap, like with this newfound appreciation and
Right.
I think conviction. I think maybe a sense of self. Poetry gave me that rap maybe at that time wouldn't have been able to provide.
You talked about commercial rap and then subgenres. What makes something commercial versus not in your mind? Like, are you selling some part of your soul in commercial?
I mean, I think easily defined as radio versus not radio. Um,
Okay.
I mean, to me, it's hard, right? Like, I don't know if I've ever been the one to get to define it, especially as somebody
Mm.
who's sort of just watching it all happen, right? Like, you're a part of the culture and you're part of it happening, and you're just sort of, it's just, you're in the times and you're young, and it's a communal culture where um, that's just kind of it's the soundtrack to your life, what's on the
Right.
top 40. And so I grew up listening to trying to get the tune. Like, I hated you had to get the dial, and it's cool
Hmm.
to be old enough now to have these
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
things that I hold close to my heart. But it was K97.5 and 102 Jams. And yeah, it's hard to answer that question as far as what's commercial. And then even for myself personally, North Cat, like you said, is like this true school type of record, but it was all over North Carolina radio, and became
Right.
this anthemic thing that transcended what you would qualify as like a pop song, so
So
it's cool.
when you started rapping, I mean, you're Japanese American and you're rapping, and on top of that, you're from North Carolina. Like, there's all these things happening at the same time. When you first hit the scene, when you first started doing your thing, what was the response from people? Like, did they kind of play it off as, a gimmick or a joke, or they heard you and they just knew that this thing's for real?
Man, it's usually a like a look. It's a usual look that you get before you go. It's like this when you
Right.
walk into the venue, or the guy at the front, or you. And then I'll be honest, man. I've always been so serious about this. Like, I've just been tight, man. And so I would always receive respect, and I would get love. And
Right.
it's something that I got addicted to for sure at a young age.
Hmm.
hmm But seeing that
What
room shift is special.
what drives you? Like, what makes you want to do this? And is your motivation today different than it was when you started?
Probably many things, man. Probably many things subconsciously that you can like try to name. Probably a lot of things that are subconscious that like are can be negative functions. For example, like I think a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I started to realize that a lot of it is an insecurity, and a lot of it, came from this like very, very unstable, needing attention and needing to prove myself as like a valid, strong person kind of thing, and realizing I had a gift and just hanging on to it. And I would say a lot of it's just naturally I like my personality likes being in front of people and having
Mm.
attention. I think there's just a natural element to that. And then another thing is sort of that American dream and hero and be the greatest in the Michael Jordan era. And I don't know if you've been watching The Last
Right.
Dance. I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah.
that. there's a lot of, and then in rap, kind of, I just karmically ended up in rap, but it's like, this is also such a competitive field, and it's a culture and it's an art, but it's also athleticism in many ways, and it's like a sport, man. So a lot of things translated, and kind of there were a lot of parallels in it, but ultimately, man, I just kind of love it, and I love words, and getting a form of a punchline, bro, is like a dope feeling. So I just kind of keep chasing that feeling, and now what's crazy, what drives me, I would say what's changed is the medium. So now I'm in the world of making songs and albums, and it's like when you release something on Spotify, it's like next to Michael Jackson shit, it's next to like, it's like you're in, and that's a trippy, like metaphysical kind of feeling too, as somebody who makes music where.
What was it? One of my punchlines, knock your Vicodin off.
Yeah. Try to.
So you grew up with hip hop. I grew up with it too. It's got a very long history. It's got a much longer history than I think a lot of people give it credit for. It didn't just kind of magically happen in Brooklyn. Like there's a whole history of, Afrobeat and culture that lives behind it. But it's gone in a very short time in our lifespans from complete obscurity to this global phenomena. You can't find a place in the world that doesn't now have some semblance of an underground hip hop scene with MCs doing the thing. Many countries have some degree of commercial pop. It's literally everywhere. Why do you think that hip hop resonates? What is its power? Another big question.
Man. These type of questions is trippy, man, because it's like so many things.
See, part of the just a part of the reason I'm asking, like, it's a question I actually ask a lot with artists and folks I meet. I'm seeing you from the outside as a Japanese American who's grown up in the U.S., grown up on hip hop. You obviously live in that culture, and yet you've got your Japanese experience and heritage behind you. And I know you've woven parts of that in, whether it's through the narrative or even parts, the language and whatnot. And so clearly what you're doing speaks to both sides of that, right? And clearly there's a lot of people of Japanese and every other conceivable descent that vibe with it. So there's something innately true about hip hop, but I'm curious to hear what people think that is.
I mean, I think that maybe another kind of question that's related is like, why is American culture moved the world the way it has, and American music, and I think it's because American music and culture ultimately is, American music specifically is Black music, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think it's the most powerful because it's been able to most beautifully translate, the kind of pain and suffering that it had to endure throughout what America is, and that's what America and American music to me is. And so I think hip hop is this, and then also like you have this side of America where like the ultimate, propaganda marketing it's kind of, that's the soul of business kind of thing that we got going on, where we're able to export it out into the world, and there's all these evil things going on with that too, but I think the point is that it moves you, man, and it's it just I don't know what it is, man. It's hard to put a finger on it.
It's funny because a lot of people are still put off when you kind of say American music is Black music or Black music is American music, but like from rock to jazz to blues to gospel to country to swing, every single genre of music, if you look at the roots of it, it started with a handful of Black artists in some part of the U.S. that just started vibing, creating their own thing. And at some point, it reaches a certain stage or a certain set of ears, and it goes mainstream. It usually leaves those artists' hands, and we might forget about them in the future. But, rock, so many people have just talked about rock as being white music. And I've known Black friends over the years who liked rock, and they were told that that's, this is white music, right? Even by other Black people. So it's like the history isn't necessarily given the due regard, because I don't think people realize the history. When you realize the history, then you appreciate it. But there's something in what they've been able to convey in this human experience that I think just transcends everything.
For sure.
Because there really is no, I don't think there's been a single modern genre of music that I know of that you can say is a whole genre that hasn't come out of some Black American roots, right? Like there just hasn't been
Yep.
in anything that you listen to on the radio or even online anymore.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, bro. It's just a trip, man. You start really thinking, because what is the average consumer? How much time are they going to take to go into that,
Hmm.
idea and history, and where is this? It's strenuous, but it's there for sure.
I'll send you some links after, but there's a rapper who's probably one of my favorites, if not one of my all-time favorites, named Akala out of the UK. I don't know if I've ever heard anyone speak so eloquently about so many things at such length. And his music, his rap is just, it's insane. It's so dense with content and metaphors and whatnot. He's so well read. It's incredible. But like I found music in that way becomes a gateway for stuff that you don't necessarily know about, right? You hear something in a 3 or 5 minute track, and then it sparks some curiosity, and the next thing you know, you might find yourself reading more about it.
Hmm.
And to me, that's part of the beauty of art.
Hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So what led you to move out to LA, and how long have you been there?
Man, it felt like it was about that time. I had in 2012 actually moved to DC, and I lived there for 3 years, and then in 2015, it's so crazy to just gloss over this whole phase and era part of your life, and then moved to LA. Yeah, 5 years ago now. I just felt like it was that time. Um, I was wanting to get into music for sure at that point, and was touring the country full time doing poetry. And so the bass actually didn't matter that much. Actually, for the first two,
Mm.
3 years, I actually wasn't in LA a lot. I really was still touring. And only the last year, 2 years, year and a half, I've been able to really be here and enjoy LA.
Why'd you stop the touring or slow down on that? Is it just focusing on other things?
Nah, I think it was, I mean, so most of the touring was touring colleges for poetry.
Hmm.
And my heart and just creatively, I was wanting to do music. And so I would still do a lot of music related stuff on the road, but just wasn't I guess the business was slowing down kind of thing. And so, yeah, you get what you want, kind of thing. And I ended up just things slowing down, man. But now I'm working on music a lot and staying still. So it's been nice.
I'm sure a lot of people will have seen 10 Things You Should Know as an Asian American in the South.
Mm-hmm.
That poem is hilarious, first of all.
Thank you, man.
The point you make about how people will see you and, call you Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee or Jet Li, or, the small handful of Asian references that they actually have on the top of their dome.
Mm-hmm.
And that even after you explain the whole thing, your background, where your parents come from and everything, they're still not going to get it anyways. That resonates on so many levels because, I mean, as a South Asian, I was born in Canada, but my parents are from India. First of all, no one knew what we were for a good part of, my growing up. And then when they knew anything, it's because of either The Party, where Peter Sellers plays this Indian character in a slapstick way, or Apu. And so Apu basically had a monopoly on everyone who was like, brown-skinned South Asian for probably 15 years. And then we finally got a new role model, which was Kumar from Harold and Kumar, right? And like I seriously, I'd be with colleagues, walking in to grab food or something. If one of them happened to be Asian, automatically we're Harold and Kumar. Like there's no debate about that. And then finally '08 comes, and then there's Slumdog Millionaire, so it takes a little bit of the pressure off of Cal Penn. But I think we're finally now hitting that point where there's more than a small handful of faces, at least in my case with Hassan Minaj and Mindy Kaling and Riz Ahmed and all these people out there. So you might be any one of these 10 people, but I find it hilarious that people just need to find some way to gravitate to connecting with you based specifically on ethnicity, right? I've had the number of people I've had say, like when, old colleagues, I'd show up on Monday, guy'd be like, and one of my friends even would be like, I was thinking about you this weekend. I'm like, why? What happened? I had this amazing butter chicken. And I just couldn't help but think about it. I'm like, dude, like I don't fucking tell you like I had this amazing hot dog and feel like I'm gonna ring you up because of that. Like that's stupid. But is that an experience that you felt like you had growing up as well, or am I just crazy?
No, absolutely, man. Yeah, that's the duty, man. The duty. Yeah.
Do
I
you
mean,
see?
it's a beautiful mechanism. Like, I mean, you see it happening, and I think people are just reaching to grab towards some way, some form of connection and some form of like connectivity, and it can be misinformed, and it can be insensitive, and it can be ignorant, but it ultimately you can't expect people to meet you like where they've never been. Ultimately, like if that's where they're at, then say, hey, that's dope, that was good, we'll try this other shit, next time. This
Yeah,
shit
yeah,
right here, I'm telling you, and maybe it'll pique the interest. And I think that's how cultural exchange happens on a really sincere level, when you can kind
yeah.
of let that guard down, and try to give them the benefit of the doubt, kind of
That
thing.
was
Yeah,
that one
but
line in
it does
dining
get
room
fatigue.
that one line in dining room that I love. That's why immigrants be cooking that food. It's the only way they communicate with you.
Mm.
That's the thing. When I heard your stuff, I'm like, this is. I mean, it's catchy first of all, and I think a lot of people go. There's nothing wrong with being overly technical. I don't think there's anything wrong with anyone's approach to music. Like everyone's got
Hmm.
their own thing and their own reasons for doing it. But if it can be catchy and memorable and somehow either inspiring or informative or make you see things in a different way at the same time, it's the best of every world, right? And that's some of the stuff that I loved coming out of your music. And I hadn't realized that you had gone you'd started in rap, but you kind of moved towards poetry as a way of expressing some of perhaps the more robust, complex thoughts, and then you've kind of mastered that. You've come back full circle to being able to bring that into your music. Is that a fair way to kind of state it?
Yes, except the master feel of things. I would say for sure not, because I think what it was that I wanted a I guess better way to express the things that I wanted to express beyond what I had already. So when I made that transition, it was like hella identity, hella family stuff. Um, and I felt like that was like my box. I had created this box for myself. And ultimately, though, rap was always my real dream, and I think cats who
Mm.
knew me and who could kind of perceive that through my work knew maybe I had a hip hop background, but that was my dream that I was always like afraid of too. So it was a bit of sort of like my owing it to myself,
Right.
kind of thing as well. But yeah, like, yeah, my upbringing for real. Like, what was it like? What was I? What kind of kid was I? That kind of painting that picture more clearly for myself and for others, I think, was a big part of rap as well.
What's it like living in LA as an artist?
It's dope, man. It's crazy. Also, being an Asian artist, man, it's crazy. There's a huge infrastructure. There's a flow. There's different currents. There's different fields. There's different, and it's a learning experience, man, and it's humbling for sure too. It's odd, man. LA is one of the only places like you feel like a movie star and a nobody, like between moments, You're like, you could just have on a nice shirt and be at some hotel party and feel like for real, like a Hollywood star for a second, and then you watch a Bentley pass by, you're like, it's a trippy
Hmm.
place, man. But it's cool.
I hadn't been to LA for a long, long time, and then over the last year, I'd been about I think 4 or 5 times before this coronavirus kind of got in the way of everything. Having been when I was much younger, I didn't really have a lot of love for LA. I didn't. It just felt like just this massive city with no soul. But going back now in the last year and having spent some more time there, having met more people, at least in the short times that I've been there, just actually really getting a feel for it. It's like no other place I've ever been, for sure. And then I've been to a lot of places, a lot of very large cities. And LA is right up there in terms of large cities. But I found it really interesting that as distant as people were geographically, just with the distance and the traffic and whatnot, if they wanted to see you and were willing to make time to see you, when they're there, they are there. They are like they're present, they're in the moment, they're hanging with you, and you could just feel that there's this creative energy and infrastructure all around. And I knew obviously that it's the place of Hollywood and the big record labels. So on the upper echelons of creativity, it's obviously got its A game.
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't realize is just how much there's happening at all strata of creativity, right? Like grassroots, underground, every conceivable thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that actually really inspiring. It was cool to see that people were actually just interested in creating good stuff, not just something that was the next blockbuster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's supportive. I mean, the whole city is like honoring the arts, and you feel supported walking around. You feel like, whoa, this place is built off of creativity. And so it picks you up in the morning, for sure.
You mentioned being an Asian artist in LA. So is there a fair bit of support and infrastructure and camaraderie across the various Asian communities in Cali or LA specifically? Like, what's that look like?
Yes and no. I'm also kind of just like a solo dolo kind of dude, but I think for me it's more of a personal thing where you don't feel like an alien. Like you don't feel, like in your everyday you walk around, you see there's this whole Asian infrastructure. And I think to create from that kind of place of like abundance and confidence in this day and age is something that like my childhood G would just be like, whoa, like this is trippy, and it still is every day. I wake up like, man, this is trippy, man, for real. So I think it's more of the human being kind of part of it where
right,
it's just affirming and you got this new surge of energy. And maybe for me it's also different because I've known something else my whole life, and now it's like as I come into adulthood, this is what I got, man. It's pretty tight.
Yeah. I get it. It kind of reminds you that you're standing on the shoulders of giants and you just didn't realize it.
For sure.
I got the same feeling when I hadn't been to India since I was 9. And then after I got married, I think it was around 31 or so when I went back the very next time. And I got that same feeling, just kind of, landing somewhere where everybody at every level of society looks like you. Mm-hmm. And from the billionaire to to the governor to the largest the worst lords and criminals to movie stars and what have you, everybody's like you. And it was kind of it's something that you have to grow up in the absence of to, I think, appreciate. And I could appreciate that going back. But a lot of me, friends who grew up there and then have moved here after, they didn't really get it because they didn't see that as the first experience of life in their formative years.
Mm-hmm. It's your people, man. Hell yeah. It's your people, man. It's tight. It's tight.
Let's talk about the series that is America and the world right now. What is life like in your sphere, in your world right now under the lockdown, because of COVID? How has this changed your world besides, obviously you're at home?
Man, it's funny, man. I'm like all I wanted to do was just go back and forth to the studio like all day, that's all I've wanted. It's all been my MO right now. And so for me on a very personal, creative level, that adjustment has not been difficult. But it's hard, man. I honestly don't know anything, so it's impossible to answer that question because I think I'm doing a good job of not being fearful of what's going to happen because it just is not going to do anything for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned I toured for so long that I depended on the road for income, and so now I just sort of have to figure out how the whole industry is going to change, and how to stay afloat, bro. I honestly have no answer for you. It's kind of trippy, but sign up for the unemployment and trying to just make it through like every American. But it's kind of difficult because it's hard to complain about anything for sure, man. I think for me personally, I'm just like, dude, people are really going through it, and I don't know what anyone's situation is like, and if I can hang on right now with these savings and stay quiet and feel out the industry and what could possibly happen next. We'll take it. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, just hoping everyone's cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt this is going to change everything in every industry in some way.
Yeah.
When I think about the world today and the way people consume music and media and film and stuff, I think we've gotten too comfortable with just getting stuff for free. You go to YouTube, you watch a video, it's paid for by advertising. Some part of that ends up going to the artist if they're fortunate or got if they've had the right wherewithal and have the right numbers.
Mm-hmm.
You go to Spotify, the streams pay very little. For the most part, for the consumer, the only thing that you have to do is just click or tap, enter a few letters, and there you are. Or just talk to your phone, and next thing you know, whether it's Siri or Google's going to give you what you need. And we don't think about the fact that we've consumed something for free and we feel like we're entitled to get it for free when artists are putting blood, sweat, and tears and oftentimes money and years into actually creating that thing. Do you think that we have an opportunity to maybe set some of that right where people, they know artists out there are investing of themselves to do what they do and create what they create? Do you think that we have an opportunity for people to kind of change their relationship with free?
I don't know, man. I don't know. It's a convenience thing too. Free and easy is another word.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking a lot about like these like transitions in the world, like plastic and just like random shit that just comes along, and it's like the next best thing, big thing, and then you realize it's not the best thing, and then you're like, oh shit, I didn't know. And I think we're all trying to make it work. And I mean, there's an element of, yes, things are cheap and easy music wise, but there's also an element of, dude, kids are like buying, $100 thing and just recording in their crib, and it's not costing them much to make too. There's like this element of some of this music is arguably, not taking them much to make it all. They're just like
right. That's true.
So yeah, there's these, and then there's this fusion of music and video with these apps and TikTok where it's getting closer. The distance between the song and the visual attached to it is becoming closer and closer. So that's also just the way we're all getting wired is different. But professionally speaking, man, for artists, there's a part of me that's like, and this is coming from me who's full-time art, I'm like, I chose this shit myself, man. Like, this is my job. Who am I to complain? And in a way, where, so we're all trying to make it and be smart about our decisions and the business of it. And so I think there are avenues for artists to be able to sustain themselves and figure out how to make it work. But it takes a lot for sure. It's difficult.
Yeah, and also I think that the ones with the most grit are the ones that pull through too, right? Like it's a tough business. I mean, I as a artist and composer, and like I know firsthand, it's not easy. Like you got to put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in. And sometimes when you see someone like kind of pop up on the scene, like, and it seems like they were overnight it just happened, and it took years to make that overnight happen. This stuff it's not easy. It's not easy. Unless you happen to just kind of be born into, one of those families, that's a different story.
Yeah.
But even then, you got to have talent.
Yeah.
2020, elections are coming up.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of a pandemic, and everything is crazy. What's how are you feeling about this moment in history? Like, I mean, you're old enough now to have seen a few presidents. You've seen enough change. Moving across the country. Like, what is the vibe in the circles you roll in, and how are you feeling about things? What might surprise me?
It's interesting when you talk about politics, brother. I actually just think about social media. Like it makes me think about that first, and it makes me think about the conversations and debates and memes and the way that our generation is reacting to the politics. And it's like, I think my opinions aren't that strong, partly because I'm probably not as educated as I could be, um, and partly because I know that that's not exactly my realm and where I'm like directly most effective. Um,
Right.
and that my realm, if it's the arts, is like, the hearts of people and, trying to figure out what's the best way to like get people to think about others, and think and be self-aware, and not preach to the choir, not make art that just preaches to the choir, and I guess try to, build a wider perspective. But yeah, bro, I don't know. Shit's crazy as fuck, dude. It's like, it's like reality TV. It's like social media. It's like, the bots are crazy, like the Russian propaganda is crazy, man. It's like all kind of, I
Well,
don't know, man.
it's
Politics
funny that
shakes me up.
it's funny that you say that you think the first thought is about social media, and it's not even about the people or the politicians themselves. But like
Hmm.
social media has created this whole other dynamic
Hmm.
entirely, right? Where everyone. So I think technology is brilliant because it's democratized access to information and everyone has a voice. And technology is an absolute raging tire fire because it's democratized and gives everybody a voice and access
Hmm.
to saying something. And we see a different, I think, perspective living in Canada of the world than the U.S. I think sees, and it's always harder to see yourself objectively when you're on the inside. I don't think we see our own country perfectly objectively either.
Mm.
But whenever I've actually spent time, like last year, traveled a lot, like in Austin, L.A., New York, but over years I've spent a lot of time in different parts of the U.S. And the people that I usually meet, and granted, is probably the kind of people that I gravitate to, they're just like amazing people that just want to do good shit. They just want to make the world or the community a little bit better in some way, shape, or form. And they're just good people that want to live a good life, and that's it.
Hmm.
You step outside of communities where you can actually talk to people and you see the narrative that's actually propagated over the media, and it's the complete opposite of it. Like, it's not like I would never even know the people that I've met exist in America in the millions that they do if I hadn't actually been there to visit. And it's kind of it's a real disservice, I think, actually, to the people, right? Because I remember I was down at South by Southwest EDU. It's the education festival attached to South by Southwest. And there was like probably 10, 15,000 people there. And just the energy around all these educators just wanting to rebuild their communities. I met some really incredible people, like these young cats from DC and all over the country that were doing incredible things in their community. I'm like, I might see you guys once in a while on a CNN Heroes thing, but the rest of the time I don't even know who you are, because that is not the story. That is not the portrayal that America even allows of itself to the outside world. And I think that's kind of a disservice, because I think if that was actually shown, I don't know what it looks like inside the US, but like if the world saw more of that, I think our opinions of the country might be a lot different. I think our opinions of America is leadership and its people would probably be a little bit more nuanced than they are. But unfortunately, it's just the machine just keeps feeding us this crap.
Hmm. Oh yeah, we eat it too, man. We're over here eating all of that crap too for ourselves. Yeah, it's a trip. It's a trip. America's a trippy place.
You mentioned
Yeah.
karma. Like, are you? I think your family's got a Buddhist background, right?
Hmm.
Does that? How does that? Does it play into the way you see the world in any way, and if so, how?
For sure, man. I mean, I think your belief system is like your true, individual, personal, deep down in the depths of your heart belief system is what I think is the cause of your happiness or suffering in many ways, the way you see things, right? And
Hmm.
so for me to grow up in a particular minority religion, in a Christian, area and country, and have to question these deep things about religion at a really young age and start to build some sense of myself through that. And then in my adolescent years, 17, 18, 19, starting to practice on my own and starting to figure out that this could be a great tool for my life, and it helped give me a good, solid understanding of life, and how to live a great life, and apply
Mm.
it to my art, and apply it to my everyday human interaction, and it really be a practice. Yeah, it's sort of informed everything for sure. It's like my lens for how I view the world.
Is it something that growing up with your parents, was it something that was just kind of in the background, like they weren't particular about you, going through any specific rituals or practices, and then you just kind of fell into it when you realized that there was something there? Or did you kind of have a more ritualistic kind of upbringing and then you started to understand it contextually as you grew up?
Great question, man. I my pops was actually extremely strict, so hella crazy strict. Hit me very physical. A lot of immigrant folks, anger issues, and one of his ways of reprimanding me was forcing me to chant. One of our main practices is chanting on
Right.
the Oden. Sorry, chant for hours, like 1, 2, 3 hours, and I mean this is from like 8 years old. 7, 8 years, 5, 7 years old as a child. So it was a repercussion. It was a negative consequence for me as a child. So long story short, was going through a gang of shit adolescent years, and then he never, he wasn't able to force me to chant. So I like hella rejected it, hated it. And I'm also super, what do you call it? Cynical, and it's hard for me to believe things. What's the word for it? Skeptical. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
All that critical too. And so, but when I was 17, was like going through a gang of shit in high school, and had I think nothing else to do, and I thought maybe I'll try it out, and then yeah, my life started to change, and it's kind of how it goes, I guess. Yeah,
Does any part of you wonder if the hours of chanting at 8 years old wore some grooves in your brain that might have come back in the form of rap and
for
patterns
sure,
and verses?
for sure. Breath control and focus, um, discipline in some ways. Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Interesting.
It's trippy, yeah.
As an artist now, what do you want when you're out in a show again? Okay, which hopefully is sooner than later, right? Hopefully, this is a footnote in human history that we can move past. I don't know how long that's going to be, but
Ooh.
when you're back out on the road, you're back out on stage, you're in front of people in whatever way. When they hear you, when they see you, what do you want them walking away feeling or thinking? Like, do you think about what you're trying to actually create for them in that way?
Themselves? That's a question I'd like to try to answer more, for
Mm.
myself, man. Thank you for asking that. Yeah, the relationship between doing this for you and doing this for others, and it was always my hope that if I did myself justice, that I would do others justice as well in a way. And if I really do my best, that maybe it's somewhere in there something would resonate, with somebody. But ultimately, any artist, I think, just wants someone to feel something, feel anything. I think, and
Anything.
anything, man. That's like the greatest gift in the world, to know that you were able to help somebody feel something. And you'll never know or be able to measure that. You'll never, you know, and you don't have the right to, and that's what's kind of beautiful about it. But yeah, hopefully to answer your question, man, I would encourage people to help others, man, and be nice to themselves, and yeah, something like that.
I love that you said themselves. I think that's actually the a brilliantly poetic way to put it.
Word.
That's the thing about music. I think music is the single greatest thing, the single greatest creation of humanity, and it's the one thing that's going to echo on in eternity in terms of what
Mm.
we're actually capable of.
Mm.
I don't think we've been able to even come close with any other thing that we've created.
Mm. Man, that's hell of a statement, man. It's dope. Yeah, like I would probably have to agree with you, man. The vibrations, all of that. It's
It's
crazy.
it's a bold statement, but I'm going to stick with it.
It's
Um,
dope.
so what should people be looking out for you or from you over the next while? Like, I know obviously we're on lockdown right now, but what do you got in the works that people should be looking out for?
Man, a gang of a wide range of, I feel like, styles of music coming out, and maybe not styles, but I've been fucking with auto tune recently, and
Okay.
you know what I mean. It's just kind of, this shit's getting crazy, man. I would say, um, yeah, man. It's just the perpetual album that's coming, kind of thing, and working on some drops and beat rock EP as well, coming very soon, and so. I'm excited, but it's also trippy because it's also like, do I want to really put out music right now? And this is like you know, what do I need to put out right now? What's kind of a lot of things
Mm-hmm.
I've been thinking about. But um, yeah, honestly, I've just been laying low, man. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully, some cool stuff.
Who do you listen to? Who've been your big inspirations over the years?
Maybe Kendrick's, soundtrack to my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Been super dope. Recently, Mick Jenkins, Isaiah Rashad, Vince Staples is kind of like this. I can always go to them in this new age as far as some good rap. And then I just started listening to homie's playlist. My homie curates these dope playlists, and it's a gang
Okay.
of gang of Griselda on there, and like my girl loves R&B, so she be having me listening to random dope R&B that I like don't know the name of. But mostly, man, just working on my own music and listening to producers. Yeah, right now just working with a gang of folks and whoever as well.
What's that process like for you? Do you hear a beat and then just start vibing with it, or do you already have an idea in mind and then you're trying to figure out the canvas?
Man, I'm always the former. Always like hear the beat, thumb through beats, take stabs at them, and the process has evolved and it's quickened over the years. But yeah, these days, man, if I hear it, I know it, and it's right for the moment, and everything aligns, and you capture this quick moment and go from there. But yeah, man, I always beat first. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, G, thank you for making time for this. This has been I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. It's funny that it just kind of worked itself out this way.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you, man. This has been super dope. Yeah, it's great to chop it up, dog.
Sweet. So I'll definitely post links when this goes up. I'll post links to some of your stuff. You can find them all over YouTube and Spotify. Yeah, I mean, you're the only G Yamazawa that you'll probably find anywhere. So you ain't got no excuses.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, man.
All right. Peace.
Peace.
If you've listened till this point in the podcast, I can assume only one of two things. One, you really dig this podcast. You just love it and you can't get enough. Or two, you started the podcast, you got busy with something else or bored, you forgot about it, and it just kept playing on your phone or was playing over your speakers in your room, you left the room, and right now I'm just talking to nobody. But if you're one of the former and you're really loving this podcast, please help spread the word. There's a lot of ways that you can help support the podcast and what we're doing here with these conversations. Of course, you can subscribe to us on any podcast app or platform of choice. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn. We're also on the incredible Ruckus Avenue Radio online station. If you really like what you're hearing, please help spread the word. There's a lot of ways you can do that. Definitely hit us up on Apple Podcasts, leave a review and a rating. You can also engage with us and suggest ideas for new guests and topics and conversations all over social media, on Instagram at AwokenWord Podcast, and on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, we're at AwokenWord. If you like what you're hearing, share it on social media. Feel free to bring up any of the conversations or topics we've talked about here in your own podcasts or your own conversations. So until next time, be well, be safe, and I'll see you again on Awoken Word. Peace out.